Hello, I'm so excited to be here with you tonight virtually. I am Deandra Brown. I am one of the members of the piano ensemble group, the Five Browns. In addition to traveling around the world and recording many albums together over the years, my brothers and sisters and I are also survivors of childhood abuse. One of the greatest hopes that we could ever have as brothers and sisters is that we could shine a light of hope for other survivors who have lived similar experiences, to let them know that there is a path forward that can lead to healing and to finding beauty in your life. Survivors of childhood sexual abuse are more than just victims. We have a unique ability to lead happy and productive lives and to help so many others along the way with the help of mental health professionals and our children's advocacy centers around the country. One of the greatest things that my brothers and sisters and I are proud of is the fact that we have supported each other and stood by one another and have done our very best to use our voice and our talents and the music that we love to help others who have also lived through abuse. Everyone watching this event tonight can and must do their part to prevent childhood sexual abuse or report it if you suspect abuse is happening. Child abuse is something that can be preventable and we can all do our part. So find your local children's advocacy center, donate to help their work, and learn all you can to protect the children in your life.
Hello, and welcome to Uniting Against Child Abuse, a national conversation. I want to thank each of you for joining us today and for choosing to unite with us in the fight against child abuse. Today's conversations are intended to be educational and inspirational, empowering all of us to be part of the solution. You know, child abuse is perpetuated by fear, shame, stigma, and silence. And the only way we can adequately help a child who has been abused is if they're able to disclose to us that abuse has occurred. Child advocacy centers are uniquely designed to reduce the secondary trauma of disclosure while providing the best opportunity for protection, justice, and healing. And the backbone of the Child Advocacy Center is the multidisciplinary team approach.
Sasha, when I started doing this work in 1987, I started as a prosecutor. And in 1989, we started looking at the multidisciplinary team model in children's advocacy centers here in Lexington, Kentucky. And at that time, if a child reported allegations of child sexual abuse, they were very likely to have to go to 4 or 5 different places: the emergency room, the police department, the Department of Social Services, sometimes to the principal's office to talk about what had happened to them. So that is one of the exceptional values of an advocacy center.
At its core, the Child Advocacy Center brings together all of those important entities that are responsible for child abuse investigations. We are all under one roof. So one of the key parts of a Child Advocacy Center is that everybody comes together. The child and the family don't have to go from place to place to place to get the services they need and to get the help they need to seek justice and healing.
A multidisciplinary team is a group of professionals working together. And if that group of professionals can work together at a children's advocacy center, there is no question but the outcomes are going to be better.
You have members from the CAC, you have law enforcement, you have medical team, child protective services, the DA's office, the medical examiner's office. We all come together and we work these cases jointly.
The child goes one place. The child talks to generally 1 or 2 people who are trained in how to talk to children. Having a forensic interviewer talk to a child is not only good for the child, but it's also good for the prosecution.
A really key part of a Child Advocacy Center is that forensic interview, that safe place for a child to be able to tell his or her story in a way that is safe and productive in terms of getting evidence for law enforcement, but also in a way that doesn't make that child feel more fearful about the process.
And so we're going to start off our interview with rapport building. And this is an opportunity for the forensic interviewer to help the child feel comfortable in the room. We will show the child that there's cameras in the room, that they're being recorded, that they're going to be observed by different observers. And those are going to be team members like law enforcement or child protective services. And they're going to know all of those things so that there aren't any secrets.
So while the child is being interviewed by the forensic interviewer, law enforcement and child protective services watch that interview from another room. And then there, at one point during the interview, the forensic interviewer will take a break. That interviewer will then go into the observation room and ask law enforcement and child protective services if they have any additional questions or if there's anything that they need clarified. And then at that point, the interviewer goes back into the room and may ask those clarifying questions. In the past, prior to the multidisciplinary team approach, we were basically setting our kiddos up for failure because they would have to tell their story to several different adults. Each time, each adult may elicit a different story. And it didn't mean that this child was inconsistent. It didn't mean that this child was lying either. It just meant that whoever was interviewing that child at the time was asking questions that were important to their investigation and only their investigation.
When we have a child who has to offer their account one time, that's the account that we go into court with. If you ask any of us, what are the facts in a car accident, we might tell you different codes, we might tell you different times, and 1,000 times that you asked us, our account may change. So now imagine a child. They're not prepared for that sort of onslaught of questioning. And I don't want them to have to be. And so if we are creating an environment where we are reducing the number of times and the number of different impressions that the child has to offer, that makes for a more successful criminal prosecution.
Multidisciplinary teams at a children's advocacy center are also very important for the individual professionals themselves. These are really hard cases, and there's a fair amount of stress and burnout that affect the actual professionals doing the work. But if you're working together, and if you're sharing, and I hate to use this word, that burden, but if you're sharing that with one another, those shared experiences in and of themselves help reduce stress for professionals. It helps them to feel less isolated, and the outcomes are going to be better for them professionally. And if the outcomes are better for the professionals, they're going to be better for children and families.
That's a beautiful thing about the Advocacy Center, who keep us grounded, connected. They provide all the services. They provide all the counseling, one-on-one, group sessions, forensic interviews. But then we have Child Protective Services, who are so important in finding whether it's a safety plan, placement, ensure that everything is okay in the household with that victim, to then our care team that provides all the amazing medical attention that these victims need. Then to, of course, law enforcement. We pick up the criminal investigation and partner up with the district attorney's office to have a successful prosecution. The importance of it all is we sit at the table and we all have a voice. We all have a voice on this in this case, but the big important thing is the whole purpose is we don't miss a step.
I believe that the most important factor in enabling a child to move forward despite the trauma that they've experienced is the holistic nature of what a child advocacy center can give them. That we're not just thinking about this in terms of a criminal conviction. That we are thinking about accountability for the person who caused harm to a child, that we're thinking about the long-term physical and mental health of that child, that we're thinking about how it is that child will begin to take next steps away from that trauma, and that all of those things are going on simultaneously. That no single sector of our society or no single sector of our community is ceding certain aspects of that child's well-being in favor of another. That we have decided that all of those things are important for that child to move forward. That is something that goes on at child advocacy centers. That is the model for everything else that happens with regard to crime victims in our society. And child advocacy centers do that better than anybody.
So it's clear that the MDT approach is the most comprehensive and effective means of intervention. But what happened during COVID-19? Abuse certainly didn't stop, and in fact, abuse cases went up while reporting went down. And fortunately for us, child advocacy centers didn't stop their work. It took a lot of courage, creativity, and innovation, and CACs rose to the challenge. Joining me to discuss the impacts of COVID-19, we have Adam Rosenberg, the Executive Director of Center for Hope in Baltimore, Maryland, Amanda Van Hooser, the Chief Program Officer of the Center for Child Protection in Austin, Texas, and Wynn Stevens, the Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center of the Bluegrass in Lexington, Kentucky. Thank you all for being here. I'm curious, what have been the huge overarching challenges that CACs have faced amidst the global COVID-19 pandemic?
I can speak for us that the first challenge that we had to meet was that we knew we had to keep working. There was not an option to go home, to shelter away from other people. So we had to continue forensic interviews, and we knew that going in. I think our first challenge was PPE, quite frankly, making sure you had enough masks, making sure you had the right cleaning equipment so that we could continue to do the work that we needed to do in a way that was safe. And then the other piece of it was figuring out how to do interviews in a situation where we knew there was more risk than normal. Either a child had been exposed or actually had the virus, but still had to have an interview, and it couldn't wait. figuring out how to do a virtual interview, figuring out how to do that quickly, how to still keep a child-friendly environment when now we're wearing masks and face coverings, and that was unnerving for some of our children. Obviously, the rest of the community was wearing it already, so it wasn't quite like it might have been otherwise. But to not be able to see people's faces and to do that and still make children safe to come in and tell stories that are very difficult and challenging on a regular day. And so it was just a matter of getting your team together and figuring out how to do it, and relying on each other. I know that centers across the country, we were all providing information to each other about how we were doing things so that we could continue to function.
Yeah, we saw very quickly that what normally would have worked wasn't able to work for many reasons. You're having to wear a mask, social distancing. And I think once we had done our first interview where the interviewer was in a mask and the child was in a mask and they were in a large room that wasn't the interview room, and it ended up with the child in tears and the interviewer in tears, we knew that we quickly needed to adapt to this new environment and find a way to still do what we're doing right now, have a conversation. I mean, I think that forensic interviewing and the disclosure of child abuse really necessitates being able to see someone's expressions and to be able to connect with them. And so we very quickly tried to figure out how do we adapt to get kids to be able to have a maskless conversation with a forensic interviewer, in a controlled environment. And that's what led to ultimately, our creation of a teleforensic interview protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing a child's face when they're making their disclosure is really important, not just to empathize with and understand the child, but also the forensic interview is a piece of forensic evidence that can be used for the purposes of prosecution. And if we can't see the child's face, we're missing something. The forensic integrity of this interview, it depends on a secure location. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's both a secure location and a comfortable environment. And we knew we couldn't abandon the CAC. We still had to have that be the base of operations, but we were unable to have a child and an interviewer in a small room. And so after the first couple failed interviews, we basically went in, and I really give credit to our forensic interview team, Crimson Baraka and her group, saw fit to do something that I think would never have been approached if it hadn't been for a pandemic. We basically rewired the room so we could have a forensic interview in essentially this format there. And we overlaid a secure video conferencing platform on top of our existing forensic interview recording platform. So we were kind of running, camera on camera to record the forensic interview, but also to be able to make sure that the child was able to speak with the interviewer still. And what was remarkable about it, and I think the thing that, will really go down, in this moment is that kids and caregivers and professionals adapted beautifully to it. Probably because kids have been using this now, the phone, their entire existence. So they're used to speaking in this manner and we're not. And for them, they had this ability to connect, with an interviewer by a video call. They could take the mask off when they were in the room. We were able to do all the initial intake stuff with masks on in our playroom. Once they got into the room, they were able to take masks off and have a conversation. And the team was still able to watch remotely. And because we were able to set up this remote video connection, team members actually became more engaged than they've ever been before because they were able to log in from their home, from their safe, comfortable environment there. And so police officers, social workers, prosecutors, all took an increased involvement in these cases because the ability to connect became better. I think we never would have been able to do this if we hadn't been forced to do it. And in some ways, I don't think we're ever going to go back. I think we're still going to have face-to-face interviews, but the ability to link remote sites, to be able to link in remote partners, just increases their involvement dramatically there.
Yeah, and we have in Lexington, our service region is 17 counties, 16 of which are considered rural. And so the ability to provide this service to children and families and community partners who live hours away, right? And to come and do this literally takes an entire day of their time to be able to do that and to shorten that distance for them is going to be a real game changer, someone said. And then also, one of the things children's advocacy centers do, many of them, is offer therapy services. And gosh, if you're in a rural community, finding the type of specialized therapy that most of us offer can be very difficult. But now that we've learned how to do this through telehealth, because of some of the innovations we've made in the forensic interviewing, being able to find a child who we can meet with on a weekly basis, who doesn't have to go to the burden of a 3-hour round trip to come see a therapist, is really going to be fantastic for helping these kids overcome the trauma they've experienced and getting back to being the happy, healthy folks they were meant to be.
COVID obviously presented a ton of challenges and it hurt a lot of people, but we can only control what we can control. And the fact that all of you and all of the child advocacy centers around this country work to brainstorm, to figure out solutions instead of feeling defeated, to not give up, to do everything that they could to serve these children. Not only did it help the children in the immediate, but now we've set up a way of doing this, child advocacy work that will reach so many more children moving forward, more than we ever could have imagined. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here with us today, for the work that you're doing in the fight against child abuse. And thank you for your innovation. We're moving the needle forward, and we didn't let COVID stop us. And to me, that's just incredible. And the future looks really bright for many, many reasons. And part of that is the work that you did. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So despite COVID-19, these children still received vital forensic interviews. In fact, through the innovation of the child advocacy centers, we now have a proven virtual formula that's going to enable us to reach more children than ever before. So intervention, that is the first step, the critical first step. But the second step is giving children their sense of self back, helping them to know that despite what happened, they are lovable, they are beautiful, and the pain that they're feeling and what happened to them is not their fault. Mental health services and other supportive services are a huge part of rehabilitating a child after abuse. And fortunately, child advocacy centers provide those services. We talk a lot about the multidisciplinary team and what happens when a child first comes in to the center and receives the forensic interview. But really, that's just the first step, because after the interview has been conducted, law enforcement, child protective services have the information they need. There's still a huge journey ahead for children. And so why is it so vital to the health of our society that these children get the mental health services that they need while they are children? And do mental health services help us work to stop the cycle of abuse and the cycle of pain in our society?
When we think about young people in that time of their life, they are building a foundation. And so if we don't provide them those opportunities to heal and recover in that time, impacts the opportunities in the future that they may have as an adult, or that they may perceive, right? We're talking about perception, that they perceive that they have as adults. And for them to be productive, contributors to their communities and to their families, and be advocates themselves.
The cycle of pain, we all know, may always be present in some capacity. It may not go away. It may just look and feel differently as years pass, based on how that perception has changed over time, based on the healing that they've been able to achieve through the therapeutic process. I think therapy can assist children in understanding their emotions so that when they occur at whatever point in their journey, whether that's present or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that they can make meaning of whatever emotion that is in that situation that they're in, if that makes sense. And I think that you can be amazing one day and not so amazing the next, and that's okay. And we teach children early on in that therapeutic process to honor that as it comes and learn how to adapt to that and know that there's help out there if they ever need it again down the road. So I think that all of those things are critical when you're thinking about mental health and stopping the cycle of pain or assisting with the cycle of pain from trauma.
I agree with what she was saying because I believe that the mental health therapy helps them move forward. I like to tell a lot of the families that come to me that what happened to you does not define you. And I think working with them as young children, we're able to help them rebuild that self-esteem because they've lost that, take away their self-blame, help them move forward. So by helping them move forward as children, it's helping them to be more productive adults.
I think that's very important for children to get access to mental health services and even their caregivers and family members, because at that point in their life, they're also developing beliefs about themselves, about the world that they live in, and all of these beliefs are going to affect their future as an adult. And I think it's important to be able to provide those support services at that time frame, so that way children are able to begin their healing process sooner, and that way they can move forward in their life and be able to know that this isn't a moment in their life that's going to define them forever, and so that they can also feel empowered as they move forward in their life journey.
And there's this question of, well, why does therapy need to happen on site at the Child Advocacy Center? How is that helpful to the child in terms of reducing additional unnecessary trauma and giving them even a better shot at being able to move forward through this?
But perhaps most importantly, what I would say, having therapy services on site where, let's say, a forensic investigation was completed or a medical examination was done, children feel believed and supported by the multidisciplinary team at every step of the way. And I think that is probably the most important facet of having us all in the umbrella of the Children's Advocacy Center.
The question I think people might have who don't know much about CACs are, does this therapy cost anything to the family or their non-offending caregivers, or is it a service that's provided for free?
That's one of my favorite aspects of the Child Advocacy Centers, is that we are able to provide those services for free as long as the family needs them. And you're right, Sasha, like the access would not be there if Child Advocacy Centers were not in place and did not have the mental health services available for those families. So I feel blessed every day that I get to be a part of an organization like that is able to reach families that we know in many circumstances would not be able to.
We're talking about accessibility through financial means, but what about accessibility through location? I mean, how does telehealth propel us forward? How does it move the needle forward in terms of providing adequate mental health services to every child?
You can work around a parent's schedule, work around school. It address the barriers that the parents may have, as far as transportation. A lot of people don't have transportation to get to a center. They're not in close proximity to a center to go to. So by providing virtual therapy, we can cover a wide range of children. We can get a lot of children in to get services. Now, it's not for all children. Children 6 and under may not have the attention span to do therapy on a computer. But if you're doing virtual therapy, that opens up space that's been limited for children to come in that need it. Children who are young, children who trauma symptoms are more severe. I look at it as we're moving forward past this pandemic and even further on. I think it's going to become more of an option for CACs and for other agencies to provide virtual therapy.
So thank you to each and every one of you for the work that you do to support the children in your communities and to continue to help move the needle forward in terms of making the world a safer, more healthy place for future generations by confronting the trauma that has affected our present generation. That it's incredible work, and Each and every one of you is a superhero. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank
Honored
you.
to be here. Thank you.
Another critical component of healing and supportive services are medical evaluations, not just to make sure that the child is physically healthy and not just to document any signs of abuse that may be there, but also to help reassure the child that their bodies are still their bodies and that they are actually okay and that they haven't been permanently altered. That peace of mind is so critical.
I actually had a 5-year-old little girl who was being seen at the CAC for concerns of sexual abuse, and the concern involved inappropriate touching of her private parts. That same 5-year-old little girl would complain about belly pain. She was actually scheduled to see a GI specialist for this belly pain. During the course of my evaluation with her, I happened to ask her, well, why do you think your belly is hurting? And she brought me closer to her and she whispered to me, because there's a baby growing inside. This 5-year-old little girl thought that because she was touched inappropriately, that she was going to have a baby. So I was able to easily tell her that she was not going to have a baby, and we talked to her a little bit about that. And she is probably the patient that I remember the most because she literally changed her whole appearance after that conversation, and she had no more belly pain.
Both intervention and supportive healing services are vital to the welfare of our children. And while child advocacy centers provide those services to many of our children today, there are adult survivors of childhood abuse who didn't receive that same opportunity before child advocacy centers existed. And so to understand the debilitating effects of unresolved childhood trauma and how that can impact adult life, I'm absolutely honored to be joined by actor, author, and activist Terry Crews. Terry, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for uniting with us in the fight against child abuse. You and I are both here because we believe that childhood trauma shouldn't have to define the trajectory of a human being's life.
That's right.
It is a journey. Even if there is intervention, even if there is therapeutic work that's done, it's a journey from childhood trauma to living a self-empowered life. It would be really helpful to just understand about your childhood and where you had to come from to get to where you are today.
Yes. Well, first of all, I grew up and, I was a product of two different, very, very different dynamics. The one was my father was addicted to alcohol and my mother was addicted to religion. So, when I was a young man, I was not allowed to do things that normal people would do. Like, I wasn't allowed to go to the movies. I wasn't allowed to dance. I wasn't allowed to listen to secular music. So I wasn't allowed to play sports. It was very, very restricting, should I say. And then my father, however, was a very abusive alcoholic. And growing up, one of my earliest memories at 5 years old was watching my father hit my mother in the face as hard as he could, and he knocked her out. And it was, these are the moments that would define my childhood all the way up literally until I was a grown man. I mean, to watch him hit my mother was one thing, but the things he would say and the things and the attitudes that I saw in the house that were very, very disrespectful, just was it put a pall on the whole household. And when I was a young man, I was so traumatized by waking up to violence, waking up to bleeding and police and, ambulances and just panic that I wet the bed until I was 14 years old. I mean, it was one of those things that my dreams were always haunted. I felt no peace. And that's a reality. That affected everything about me. It affected a lot of my mentality. And another thing I want to say is that hurt people hurt people. I I have to say, I became a toxic person simply because of never actually dealing with the pain that I endured as a young man and as a kid. Um, and it's inevitable unless there's an intervention, unless there's help, unless there's a way to really put a pause button on a lot of these bad things. These cycles tend to continue through generations, which can really, really affect everybody around you.
I mean, 100%. As you're talking about the instability and the constant repetitive trauma, waking up and not knowing if someone might be dead.
Yep.
Not only is that trauma just, life altering, then we're talking about, a childhood, right? Like that's supposed to be the innocent formative years. And so when that trauma is introduced at such a young age, it plays a huge role in how a human being sees themselves and how they see the world. What was your experience from that transition from child victim to adult trying to figure out how you could be your own man in the world?
Wow. Let me tell you, I was scared all the time, Sasha. I mean, I don't remember a time when I wasn't fearful. Very, very afraid, never felt safe. And I remember, watching television and seeing happy families, like, fictional families like the Brady Bunch or the Partridge Family, and just going, I wish I had that. Like, just looking at them and marveling at the peace that they enjoyed. I mean, I remember thinking that one of the kids on those shows should be hit for saying something like that. You know what I mean? These are things that you go, oh my God, like, oh no, I would get smacked. There's no way I would get away with even questioning what was going on in my household. My father, by any intents and purposes, just by the fact that he got out of small, tiny Edison, Georgia, and had a job at General Motors, he considered himself very successful. But yet he would terrorize, our household. And then I want to be really clear about this too, because at this time, in this time and day, and also we're talking about within the culture I was in, you owned your family as a man. You basically, your wife was property. Your kids are property. It's no different than if you were to whip an animal that got out of place or out of line. It was nothing to him to feel like he needed to keep us in line and keep my mother in line, and be it through abuse, be it verbally or physically. And what happens is a loss of sense of self. You know what I mean? Like I had no control. And what I found is that I was doing that to my own family. Once I grew up and had a family, and I never hit my wife, but there were many, many times that I viewed my family as property, as my, these are my family. And, the way is like, if it's not my way, it's the highway. I would go off on any little thing. And I felt like that was part of being a man. I felt like because I was a man, I was more valuable than all the women in my life. And it's just self-destructive, man, because you're truly only half a man.
But that's what's so incredible about you, Terry, is like you came from such a traumatic childhood. And through that trauma, these toxic learnings, were a part of your upbringing. And it takes a lot for a human being to be willing to not only look at themselves and take responsibility for their actions, but it takes even more courage and strength to rewind back into the past and look at those painful, unhealed traumas and confront them. The work that you've had to do to own your pain and confront it so that you can move forward healthfully is incredible. And I'm really curious to know what that therapeutic process was. How do you go from being repressed by and controlled by that trauma to a place where now you can talk about it and move forward in a way that helps others?
It's a little bit, a lot of like the 12-step program. You know what I mean? When you realize you've lost control over your life, that was the moment for me when my wife basically walked out and she said she had enough. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm successful. I've done I've checked all the boxes, so to speak. You know what I mean? And she was just like, no, there's, you need help. And what I have to say is that part of the upbringing that I had when I talked about the serious ramifications of what the religiosity was, is that all therapy was viewed as demonic when I was a kid. It was viewed as quackery. In the culture I grew up in, it was like if you ever saw a doctor for your mind, you were already crazy. So when you're talking about the help you needed was actually demonized. That was a really, really hard thing to overcome, because you feel like you're disappointing God himself if you go to a doctor and talk about your problem. So it was you're talking about a big, big whammy for me. But as an adult, I was able to just try it. And you have to understand, when I first went to therapy, I thought, this is not me. This is crazy. There's no way this is me. And then the guy says, he said, is your dad an alcoholic? I was like, yeah. And he said, is your mother religion? I was like, yeah. How did you know? I mean, all this, when they started reading my mail, and I was going, wait a minute, that is me. That is me. And I do have this problem. And they were like, Terry, you have a double life. I was like, what? Wait a minute, what? And they just started to call these things as they were, which forced introspection. It was literally like, I had a movie in my head that was, Dirty Harry. You know what I mean? And I was the hero. But then you look back and you say, wait a minute, Dirty Harry was killing a lot of innocent people. And you look back and you go, wait a minute, this movie is telling the wrong message. And I said, holy cow, I had this whole thing backwards. And the only way I can really relate it to is that it was like thinking that the sun revolved around the earth, and then finding out that nope, we go around the sun. It all looked the same, but holy cow, did that not? When I say it was watershed, it was it's revolutionary. I was going, I had it all wrong. And then that began my quest. And I just kept digging and kept digging. And through tons of tears, tons of introspection, tons of examining, and tons of forgiveness. That's another thing that enabled me to move on. Because one reason I was angry is because I never forgave. I mean, if you were on my list, you were always my enemy. You know what I mean? This stuff comes from all that, those 18 years I spent in my parents' house. There were good times that kept us together, but then there were horrors that definitely affected me forever.
Man, I mean, like, I'm so like happy for you and for Rebecca and for your family that you're at a place now where maybe there's more peace and now the ability to move forward with so much more self-awareness, ownership of one's true narrative instead of projected false narratives. And my question on that is like, so you know now from your own experience that therapy was hugely productive and hugely helpful in terms of your ability to move forward from the trauma. How helpful do you feel it would have been? I mean, obviously we can't change the past, but we're looking at the past to understand how we can better the future. Like how much would it have helped if you and your mom had access to therapy when you were 5 through 18? Like, do you feel like it's important that knowing what we know about the past, that we make sure that kids have access to healing and justice while they're kids? What opportunity could that give to them that maybe you didn't have when you were a kid?
I'll tell you this, man. I would have avoided most of my issues had I received help, or my mom had received help. But in that period in time, it was viewed as an image of weakness. I just got to tell you, man. You know, there were probably about, I would say probably 7 to 10 times I remember distinctly us packing our bags, and my mother was like, "I'm out. I can't take it anymore. This is it." And I was so happy. I was like, okay, we're out. We're out of here. And I remember having one little play suitcase, and I would pack it all up and put all my stuff. And then the rest of my clothes, I would put in garbage bags. That's what we did. And I put everything up, and I was ready to go. And then the morning would come, and she would say, "We're not going anywhere." And I was like, no, we're back here. You know, she couldn't leave. And And I think it was a lot of the verbal abuse that she felt she could never ever make it on her own. It was pretty brutal, man. I have to say it was brutal. And then on top of that, with alcoholism, it was just a toxic mix. And if we had had any kind of therapy or help, man, I can tell you, I would have embraced them. Because I knew this wasn't right. I knew something was very, very wrong with our family, and I knew we needed help.
I mean, 100%, man. And you know, I live by this mantra a lot, this idea that we can't change the past. We can't directly control what happens around us, but we can choose how we show up in the present moment of our lives. And as we're talking about this, as we're thinking about future generations, our kids today and the kids of tomorrow, like, why is it important then that our society do everything that they can, not only to listen to these kids, but to support child advocacy centers? And why is it so important that we be engaged in this fight right now? Why is it so important?
All I can say is that there are psychological issues that are being developed right now that we have yet to deal with, that are going to come to fruition if we do not intervene now. It's literally changing the fabric of society, slowly. And, all change is incremental until it's too late. That's the thing. It's literally you don't even see it coming. And then all of a sudden, it's like, what just happened? We have to intervene now.
100%, man. I mean, I for my own process, I think about my childhood self, and I think about, the thing is that children who are abused, who experience abuse, they lose their ability to see their value. They lose their ability to have self-love. They start to believe that something's wrong with them, that they're dirty, disgusting, unlovable. And the thing is that, I mean, you and I both know, sitting here today as adults, having worked through our trauma, that, childhood Terry or childhood Sasha, it wasn't that we weren't beautiful anymore. It wasn't that we weren't worthy of love. It's that our perception of that beauty, our perception of that worthiness, that's what went away as a result of the abuse. And I think by giving children the opportunity to address that trauma, to break that belief system down and rebuild a healthy one, despite the trauma they've endured, if we're doing that work, if we're supporting child advocacy centers, we're giving these children an opportunity to not be defined by the trauma that they endured, and we're giving ourselves a better opportunity for a healthier future.
Hey, Sasha, and I got a word for just anybody out there. You know, one thing that I do, I keep a picture of myself at 6 years old on my phone, and I talk to him. I literally talk to him because he's still me. He's still me, and he's cute, and he's innocent, and he's special, and he's precious. And I go, man, you know what? You're great. And you are a dynamic kid. And I tell that to my young self, the stuff I never heard, you know, and it did a lot to heal me, you know, and to anybody out there, just, you know, who went through things like this, if you're an adult, you know, you're still that little kid. That little kid is still you. And it was a technique that just really was groundbreaking for me, because I always protect that little one, always. And I think just like we would protect the little ones that are in us, we need to protect the little ones that are all out there right now, and we have the chance to do that.
100%, man. Yeah, 100%. And we're doing it by coming together today, by having the conversation, by pushing through the taboo label of child abuse and bringing it to the forefront. We're doing it, man. And, you know, it's about making the choice every day to be engaged. And I just really appreciate you joining us to be a part of this, and for all the work that you're doing, not just right here in this conversation, but all the conversations you're having. But I do have one more question, and it's pretty important. Do you like yogurt as much in real life as Terry in 9-9 likes yogurt? Like, is that a real thing, or like, what's the deal?
No, it is a real thing. I love yogurt. And you know, awesome. I was eating that yogurt on set in the first year. People were like, this is really a weird little, they see my big hands on this little dainty yogurt cup. And they were like, Terry loves yogurt. And that's the one thing I love. They actually put it into the fabric of the show. And it's very, very true.
What's your favorite flavor?
Strawberry, full fat, strawberry, all the way.
Right on. Like chunky strawberry, like pieces of strawberry in there?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, man. And I like the fruit on the bottom. You know what I mean? Where you have to stir it up a little bit, you know? It's so good, man. It's so good. The great probiotics too, man. Good for the gut health.
Fruit on the bottom, it asks for you to engage, man. It asks for you to engage. But seriously, Terry, like, I'm glad we got to end on that note. Oh man, Terry, seriously, man, thank you so much for being here and for engaging in this conversation with me.
You got it, my man. Oh, it's so valuable, and thank you for having it. I'm honored to be a part of this conversation. Honored.
Power to you, man. Power to you. Thanks for using your voice to make a difference in this world. That's what it's all about, man. Paying it forward.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you.
Broken world. Sometimes I lose where I'm going, but know that grace is what I'm fighting for. Pain in my heart, sometimes feeling alone. I just pray that you keep me from falling down. desire to heal the brokenhearted, and for the ones who see no hope, I will be their warrior.
Survivors of sexual abuse are more than just victims. We have the capability of living a happy and productive life with the help of mental health providers and children's advocacy centers. I have chosen to use my voice through music and power of partnership to become a warrior against abuse. And everyone watching this event can and must do their part to prevent child abuse or intervene when they suspect it. Help us today by finding your local CAC, donating, and by learning how to keep all children safe through various daily resources that are offered to you and your family. On behalf of myself and warriors everywhere, I want to say thank you for showing up today, as it means that several children throughout our nation will be able to receive the help that they need to grow into who they are called to be, happy, whole, and free from the traumas of abuse.
Desire to heal the brokenhearted, and for the ones who say no hope, I will be their warrior. I'll set the world on fire, so my heart is burning bright, forever with the desire to heal the broken hearted, and the ones who say no hope. And I wanna set the world on fire, so my heart never turns cold or ever goes dark, because I know what I'm fighting for. On top of the world, I'll be. When you are in need, I will be there for you. I'll be a warrior. I'll be a warrior. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing your voice and for showing us what it means to thrive despite childhood trauma. Another human being who has thrived despite childhood trauma is child abuse survivor and TV journalist Don Lemon.
Thank you, Sasha. I'm Don Lemon, a journalist and a survivor. It is a privilege for me to join this conversation and lend my voice to this very critical issue. Every child in this country deserves a childhood free from abuse. It's a basic human right, and we all have a stake in helping to protect our children. Today, 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused by the time they reach 18. The last year has been particularly difficult. Child abuse didn't stop during the COVID-19 pandemic. It just got harder to detect due to the lack of personal interactions with teachers, school officials, and healthcare professionals. So many children are afraid to talk about it, and I certainly understand this struggle. I kept the stigma of childhood sexual abuse to myself until I was in my 30s. I didn't really tell anyone about it. Obviously, when you're a child, you don't really know how to handle it. I didn't know who to call, and certainly I didn't know that I could get support anonymously. To my fellow survivors, don't be silent. As long as you keep it a secret, you're empowering the perpetrator to continue their abuse. As much as you think it hurts, tell your story. Encourage other people to tell their stories. Abusers are afraid of being found out, and once they are found out, then they no longer have that power over their victims. That is their biggest fear, so don't give them that power. Child advocacy centers are on the front lines in the response to child maltreatment. For decades, their efforts have impacted millions of child abuse victims and their families across this great nation. They are helping restore children's lives so we, the survivors, can get back to dreaming and thriving as human beings. Had I known, I would have contacted my local CAC. It would have helped me and a whole lot of kids who were in my same position or worse. Child sexual abuse is a significant public health crisis, but it is preventable. Empowered and mentally healthy youth is vital to our future. We must support our children now and invest not only in the quality of their lives as they mature, but in the overall health of our society as a whole. I applaud the child advocacy centers who came together to launch this national conversation to educate, inspire, and encourage our local communities nationwide in this effort to end child abuse. Everyone watching this event can and must do their part to prevent child abuse or intervene if they suspect abuse. Help us by finding your local CAC, by donating, by learning how to keep children safe. Let's work together. Child abuse doesn't have to end a child's dream. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Providing children with the opportunity to grow up to be happy, healthy, self-empowered human beings who bring strength and awareness to our society is one of our main goals. But that's only part of the solution in tackling this seismic social epidemic that is child abuse. Prevention is another extremely important component in reducing the amount of children who are abused in our country. Unfortunately for us, child advocacy centers are leading the charge in child abuse prevention, and there's plenty of room for all of us to join them in those efforts. So Jean, why is it important that child advocacy centers engage with their communities to educate them on prevention, on awareness? Why is it important that there's a solid relationship there through prevention?
I think it's really important for child advocacy centers to expand our work beyond the partnerships that we have with law enforcement and child protective services and prosecutors, which is kind of for decades has been kind of our go-to partnerships. What we found during the pandemic was that schools and education systems and after-school programs that work with children and families have become the front line of protection for children. And when COVID hit and the schools closed, we saw this dramatic drop in child abuse and neglect reporting, the connection and the relationships children have with their teacher, with their school counselor was almost cut off. And I know over the last year there's been some repair of that, but we lost a lot of connection with children. So as a child advocacy center, investing in our resources and our time in those early intervention and prevention efforts is critical for us to get ahead of maltreatment of children.
So what does that look like in terms of teaching or informing kids on what they can do or what they should look for? I mean, how is prevention also about engaging children specifically in appropriate settings?
Yeah, I think when you think about what more can we be doing to educate children around abuse and neglect, there's been a tremendous amount of energy in the Child Advocacy Center world about getting public policy that requires children to have education and information around child abuse and neglect in elementary school and in junior high school. And the more we are supporting that kind of policy, the more we're delivering training programs and offerings and information to children, the more empowered they're going to be. I think it's really important for children to know that if something is happening to them, that they're not the ones who have caused this. We see children routinely in our waiting room who are feeling guilty that they reported this, or that they're worried someone's going to get in trouble because they're stepping forward and making this outcry. And what we have to constantly do is remind them that This isn't their fault. This isn't something that they did or that they caused to happen to them. And reinforce this notion that coming forward is the best thing for them to do right now.
There can be a lot of obstacles and barriers in a family's way when abuse is happening, whether it's stigma, whether it's perception of shame, whether it's that attachment to somebody who might be causing harm. There's a lot of reasons that make it so challenging and so hard and so difficult for a young person or anyone really to come forward and talk about the abuse that they're experiencing or even to ask for help. It's so important that we know the signs of what to look for and how to recognize when someone's struggling. It's so difficult for a young person, for any person to come forward and to ask for help. And as a community, we can make it a safer place and we can create opportunities to have this conversation, to let families and kids know that this is something that unfortunately does happen. But when it does, there's safe places to go. There's teams of people that want to help. And there's resources to help families heal together.
We rely on our communities to do this, be that one person to stop that abuse for that child. For people who don't like to identify it or address or talk about child abuse, I like to refer it back to our safety measurements. Say, for instance, like we have in school, everyone has a fire drill in place. What is your drill? What is your safety measurements when it comes to child abuse? When it comes to child abuse, you may come across a child that is at high risk of being abused or has been abused in the past before you ever use that fire drill or that tornado drill. So again, it's not if it will happen, but when will you come across it? And when will you have to face making that call? So I always tell anyone that I'm talking to when it comes to reporting child abuse, you are our frontline staff, our eyes and our ears that are out there calling in cases, reporting cases to law enforcement or child protective services so we can keep kids safe.
So it is critical that the community be engaged in the fight against child abuse. We all together have a responsibility to keep kids safe, and the community really is on the front lines together in a position to recognize when something bad might be happening to a child or to a young person. The biggest piece for me is that, child abuse can be a taboo subject. It can be really difficult for people to bring up and talk about. It does make people uncomfortable to talk about child abuse. And so that's the reason why it's so important that we don't turn away and that we do talk about this. That's why it's so exciting to be a part of an event like this, because collectively we're coming together and saying that this is important. This is something that happens. We're standing up to face this together. And most importantly, we want families to know that there is support and services and there's help. And it's right around the corner. It's probably in your backyard. So I appreciate the way that you asked the questions. I appreciate you kind of highlighting the stigma and the shame, because we don't want that to be a barrier for anyone.
It's clear. Child advocacy centers are the most valuable resource that we have in the fight against child abuse. And they're run by teams of superheroes who work every single day to serve and protect our children, to ensure a healthy future for all of us. And child advocacy centers are nonprofit organizations, and they need our support today more than ever. If our children have the courage to come forward and share their vulnerable truths, then we owe it to them not only to listen, but to do absolutely everything in our power to help support them, to help protect them. And child advocacy centers give us that opportunity. So today, right now, together, we have an opportunity. I'm inviting each and every one of you to invest in our children, to invest in our future, to invest in our child advocacy centers. Text CAC 2021 to 44321 and make your donation today. Because together, we will protect our children. Thank you.
On behalf of the dedicated staff here at Center for Hope in Baltimore, Maryland, I want to thank each of you who work hard to protect and support children every day.
Thank you. From the Children's Advocacy Center of the Bluegrass in the heart of Kentucky, where we're known for
the world's finest thoroughbred racehorses, America's only native spirit, Kentucky bourbon, being the birthplace of George Clooney, Chris Stapleton, and Abraham Lincoln, and the University of Kentucky and the 2021 National Championship Women's Volleyball Team.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Center for Child Protection staff, our agency partners, the Austin community, and the children we serve, thank you. Thank you for watching our event, and thank you for joining our efforts to end the cycle of child abuse here in Austin, the state of Texas, and across the nation.
Thank you.
Hello from the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center. On behalf of our dedicated staff and partners who work tirelessly every single day to protect and serve the children of Dallas County, we would like to say thank you for all of your support.
Staff and partners at Alliance for Children, we want to say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us at the CAC of Suffolk County,
who are dedicated to supporting children and families, we appreciate your participation today and want to say
thank you.
On behalf of the team here at Chicago Children's Advocacy Center, thank you for your support in our work to battle abuse and restore lives.
Thank you.
Our team here in Memphis works towards safety, healing, and justice for victimized kids. Thank you for uniting against child abuse.
thank you.
On behalf of the Children's Assessment Center in Houston, Texas, and our wonderful and dedicated staff,
thank you.
Hello from the Child Advocacy Center of Sedgwick County in Wichita, Kansas. On behalf of our dedicated staff, we want to thank you for helping make children's safety a priority. It takes all of us to work together.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, on behalf of our team in Charlotte, North Carolina at Pat's Place Child Advocacy Center, thanks for your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the team at Project Harmony in Omaha, Nebraska, who work to serve and protect children every day, we just want to say thank you!